Hello and welcome to a new episode of Reptil TV. Here's my intro animal for you, a Yellowtail Cribo. A Yellowtail Cribo or indigo snake. Indigo snakes are truly beautiful North American, or rather North to Central American colubrids. No, definitely Central America as well, or actually even down to South America, I think. Yes, all the way down to South America. They're relatively large, robust colubrids. So this one here is a juvenile, a young individual, but indigos can actually grow up to, or in fact well over, 2 full meters in length, sometimes even a bit more. The yellowtails also reach about, or yes, definitely around 2 meters as well. Truly a fantastic terrarium snake. In recent years, their popularity has actually been increasing, probably because they're such an impressive, powerful animal. They're actually not that easy to breed. Maybe that even adds to their overall popularity, as strange as that may sound to some people. But sometimes when something isn't quite as easy to breed as, say, rabbits, it can actually increase its popularity a bit, particularly among terrarium animals. As I said before, in my opinion, I would give them a solid 10 out of 10 points for their truly impressive and striking appearance, and at least 9 out of 10 for their beautiful and wonderfully varied colors. And that's why my intro animal for you is, of course, Drymarchon core, not melanurus, the Yellowtail Cribo. Today's topic, we had a ball python, he just wants to cuddle. We got this headline from web.de. One of you from the community sent me an email and said, "Hey Stefan, have you read this yet?" And shared the link with me on web.de, which is an email service with the headline "Ball Python, he just wants to cuddle," suggesting the snake's affectionate behavior. It's a study from a Canadian university, specifically the Wilfrid Laurier University, which is located in Canada. So there were actually 3 scientists. Listen closely, I'll tell you their names. A Morgan Skinner, a Tamara Compen, and a Noah Miller, who decided to take a closer look at an interesting question, specifically whether ball pythons in this case are truly solitary animals, as they're generally viewed and commonly kept in the reptile hobby and terrarium scene, or whether they might actually be a lot more social than we usually think. According to their study, they reference behavior that's already been observed in other snake species, suggesting ball pythons might not be such loners after all. For example, it's known that with garter snakes or with rattlesnakes, you can actually find real nests in the wild where many of them are together. Although I think those are mainly places for hibernation. So those aren't places you find in the summer, but as far as I know, those are more like overwintering sites. And whether the ball python might actually enjoy cuddling a bit more than people usually assume, that's exactly what they went on to test. They worked with a group of 30 juveniles. That's also an important point. They used juveniles. I don't know why juveniles, maybe adult animals would have been a bit more telling in terms of the results, at least in my opinion. But they took a total of 30 juveniles, divided them into 5 groups with 6 animals each, and placed them into a fairly large container for 10 days. And inside this container, there were several different hiding spots. And then they looked to see, okay, if I have a large container and various hiding spots, if they all want to be alone, you'd expect that each ball python would go into a different hiding spot. But they found, oh, that's not the case at all. They actually spend a lot of time in one hiding spot, or maybe even all of them in a single hiding spot, right? This particular test then led the scientists to the conclusion that all of them were in the same hiding spot because they wanted to stay close to each other, because they wanted to cuddle, as the researchers themselves put it, or simply because they're naturally social and interactive animals. So much for the basic test procedure. There are, well, 2 things about this are quite interesting. The first interesting thing is you'd think that a scientist conducts a study and you really can't doubt that it's a scientific study. And who am I? Just a regular high school graduate, honestly, without any kind of scientific degree. What am I doing here trying to act like a know-it-all? I'm going to play the know-it-all anyway, simply for the reason that for 35 years, I've basically done nothing else every day but work with ball pythons, whether in captivity, in herpetoculture, or in Africa, where I've already been at least 50 times in the natural habitat of ball pythons, where I've seen, searched for, found, photographed, and filmed them in the wild. And that's exactly why I'd really like to take a moment to share my own personal opinion on this particular statement with all of you here. And on that note, here's a quick little call to action. Feel free to post down below what you personally think or what immediately comes to your mind when you take a look at this study. Is it the same as what I'm about to say, or does something totally different come to mind first? But I'll tell you what I think about it. We terrarium keepers know that a snake in general, and a ball python in particular, of course, always looks for a hiding spot. It looks for its hideout, whether in the terrarium or anywhere else, it looks for a place to hide. In my opinion, it's not about whether someone else might already be there, but rather it chooses its hiding spot based on the optimal climate, you know? And if there are 10 hiding places in that large container they're talking about, the climate won't be the same everywhere. And I can easily imagine that many of them end up under the same hiding spot. That has to do, among other things, with the climate, because exactly at that spot, the climate is just a little bit better than at the other 9 spots. That can play a role. Then in terrarium keeping, it's actually sometimes the case that we have spots where we think, or where we place the hide because we think, oh, this is perfect. It's not too warm, not too cold. The humidity is just right, so my ball python will hide there. What does my ball python do? It hides in a completely different spot where I actually wouldn't expect it. And if I put a second ball python in, it will hide in the same spot. But not because it's hiding there, just because one is already lying there, but because there's simply something about that spot that the animals like best. What exactly that is would actually be interesting for a study. What do they like best? So what I would absolutely rule out is that they like it best just because one is already lying there, but rather because something about the climate is different there. Maybe the study could have been improved as well. I'm actually pretty sure that if I put only one snake in this large enclosure, so if I try it out, it would lie in the same hiding spot where they all used to lie. Yes, so even if it were completely alone, it would still lie in that hiding spot because there's just something about that spot that's simply the best. What I can honestly say from experience in Africa is that no matter when or where you go looking for ball pythons, you will simply never find a spot where multiple ball pythons are lying together in the same burrow. That simply doesn't happen. You can ask any trapper in Africa. We've actually interviewed trappers about things like this, and we didn't brief them beforehand. We didn't tell them you should say this or that, but instead we just asked, hey, where does a ball python... Oh, and sometimes it was about ground or tree dwellers. So I also asked, have you ever found a ball python in a tree? Because there's a lot of literature claiming that ball pythons are tree dwellers. And the trapper's answer was also, no, they're never in the trees, they're on the ground. And it's the same when you ask them, have you ever seen 3, 4, 5 of them together? Or even, 2 of them might be together during mating season. It does actually happen that a pair will be lying together in a hiding spot. It makes sense. They have to mate somewhere. But even outside of the typical mating season, you generally won't find a pair together in the exact same hiding spot. Usually the male will be somewhere, perhaps in one location, and the female will be somewhere else in a different spot. What also happens is, of course, if you do happen to find a clutch of eggs, we know that ball pythons incubate their young and the babies hatch. The babies don't just hatch and crawl straight out of the hole and take off. First, they go through their initial shedding. I've actually experienced and seen this myself in Africa, that you find a mother over more or less empty eggs, and the young are still with the mother, you know. So I'd estimate that this lasts until about their first shedding, because after their first shedding, they go off to look for food, and then they're gone. They don't go out to find food and then come back to the family. Instead, they go off on their own to hunt for food and end up scattered somewhere. But then you won't find any African trapper or anyone like that who would say, yes, you'll find a cave where many young ball pythons live together, you know, always going out to look for food and then coming back there. That simply doesn't exist in nature. So if in nature they are always solitary, and that's a fact, then there must be something wrong with this experiment. And they're not suddenly going to say in captivity, oh, now that we're in captivity, now we want to live together. So those are my arguments for why I view this scientific study, without wanting to step too close or be disrespectful to the scientists, with some skepticism. So I want to say, I think it's great that they're working with reptiles, with snakes. I think that's fantastic. But I believe there was simply a mistake made in this study. What I would also like to criticize a bit is that they used juveniles. Using adults might have been a bit more meaningful. But even then, of course, it could still happen that they choose the same hiding spot, simply because there's something special about that particular spot. And one more argument that I just forgot to mention. If these mixed groups they used maybe even included multiple males, like more than one male ball python, then keeping them together is actually almost irresponsible, because in nature, they really are rivals to each other. They fight over the females. Male and male do not get along. We sometimes have that discussion in the reptile hobby when people say, oh, I've got two males and they get along fine. No, they have to, because they're in the same enclosure. They won't kill each other, sure. But in the wild, they'd never be together. A male sees another male as a rival. A male can at most only accept a female. And that's really only during mating season, but otherwise not. Oh, and another very significant argument, one that I feel is quite important to mention, now comes to mind. Anyone who breeds ball pythons knows that if I have babies, if I have 5, 6, 7 ball python babies, and I put them together in one terrarium, they won't start eating, not in 100 cold winters. Maybe 1 or 2 of them, but I won't get them to eat as long as I keep them together in one terrarium. Anyone who breeds ball pythons knows that I have to keep each animal in a separate terrarium, and then they'll start eating. Well, you know, if I keep them all together, they won't eat because they stress each other out. You don't really see much. It's some kind of mental stress. But when they're lying there all nicely in a pile, cuddling together, they're only lying there because they have to. But they will never start eating. They only start eating after I've kept them alone for weeks. So that's a classic beginner's mistake, because when I have customers who have a pair and have their first more or less accidental breeding of ball pythons, it often happens that they build a nice new terrarium and put the 5 babies in there. And then after a few weeks, they come to me, Stefan, why aren't the babies eating? I've already tried everything, dead, live, and then I tell people, well, you have to keep each animal separately and then they'll start eating. So that's also a very clear and unmistakable indication. They simply want to be alone. Yeah, I've rambled on and philosophized again, but I honestly think it's important to present and thoroughly explain my arguments and reasoning. That's exactly why people say the ball python just wants to cuddle. No, it really doesn't want to cuddle at all. Truly, it does not. It just wants to be left alone. That would be the correct statement. It wants to be alone. It wants its peace. It doesn't want anyone bothering it. It's a loner and will always be a loner. As I said, I'm looking forward to your comments. Post them down below. This was once again the topic of ball pythons. Otherwise, see you in the next episode. And in this case, once again, check my balls, or maybe check out whether the balls actually feel like cuddling. No, the balls definitely don't want to cuddle.